by a man with a machete outside a nightclub in...
Was assaulted outside a Toorak nightclub.
Paran nightclub drive-by shooting.
My name's Danny Rant and I've worked in the music and entertainment industry for over 2 decades. Come with me as I pull back the curtain on Australia's craziest and wildest nightclub precincts in the Clubland Chronicles. A couple of guys with machetes chopped the bouncers. It was when I found out my mum passed away. Got a screwdriver and then stabbed the dude in the neck. And chicks that were coming to try and marry football players. It was good, it made the papers. Herald Sun said that the police came, which they did. One of the guards ended up stabbing the guy. They punched on you and the fight went for fucking ages. We come up with an idea to ban that dance. Welcome back to Danny Rants. Tonight we're going down to King Street and Queen Street. So we're going to start at the top end of King Street as part 2, and we're going to finish through Queen Street and head to the QBH. Firstly guys, before you start watching this, please sub to my channel. Those subs make such a big difference when I launch videos. So if you can and you like my stuff, you want me to keep making it, go do that now. All right, let's rant. So here we have Francis Street off the back of King Street. So we're not far from Inflation. Up there, I went in there in detail last time. But down here was a club called Tattoo, where there's a back entrance. So we're going to go to the front entrance and the back entrance. But basically, Tattoo, I think I'm saying it wrong, but it was like a big club back in the day. You can see it here, the back of it. And it has reopened, but only from the front as Bottom End. So Bottom End is the venue now. And previous to that, it was called Bubble. So Bubble, obviously, when it comes to raving and whatnot, is one of the biggest and most famous, next to PhD, Base Station, Hard Candy, all those sort of names. But this was, and this building here is still, the old Bottom End. I remember only once ever coming here and we used this access to get up. You went up 2 stories right up to the top part, which is up there, and then that's where you sat to party. And that was only the top level at that time because it was sort of dying down, I guess, by then. At its peak, through multiple times, it has definitely had all 4 rooms open. Sorry guys, there's a guy sleeping there, I just don't want to wake him up. Sorry bud. So in my time, it was closed for a long time, so I didn't really know it was there. Then it opened up and there was something there called Survivor. They killed it, did really well. My business partner Kyle Hand did Jamie Jones there, Dave Lazarus and a bunch of others. Can't remember the label name at the time, but that was like when it first began. Fucking smashed it. They absolutely killed it. And then Survivor had like a pretty good run. I went there a couple of times. One time after a wine day, so I can't remember what it was called now. It was like this wine day where you go there and you absolutely get poleaxed, and then they take you back to another winery and they drop you in the city. So we went to Barclay, and then I don't know how the fuck I ended up here, but I ended up at Survivor. Anyway, long story short. So after that, it had another name. I think it was called Powerhouse at one point, or something like that. Maybe I'm saying, or Power Station it was called, which was sort of like pretty edgy. And then it would turn into Anyway. So Anyway left the Metro. For those that don't know, Anyway was a club that was run by Untitled, who are now the biggest independent promoters in Australia. Younger blokes, I think they're like 30, 31. They started Anyway at Metro, was doing like 2,000-3,000, and then they moved down here. And then during that period, they started BTV, and the rest is history. It's one of the biggest festivals in Australia now. So the Bottom End is here. It was designed by a guy called Michael Delaney, who's famous for designing honky tonks. Also too, he did La Di Da, he did Bottom End, and he also did, Grandma, which is the old tunnel, but we're going to get to all them later. Bottom End here, you walk in, and then, as I said, you can see from the front of the building, it's 3 levels. I think I said 4, but it's actually 3 levels. So this also was another famous club called Bubble. So Bubble was notorious as a rave club, as I said before, had its problems with GHB and drugs, as do majority of those hard dance clubs in general. And they had a couple of incidents towards the end that didn't close them down, but definitely had some serious impact on the venue and pressure. So a guy called Peter Ivanovic owns a lot of these venues in King Street, or this part of King Street anyway, the top end. And he is known to close them down for long periods of time. So the tunnel, which turned into Grandma, I reckon that was closed for like 10 years, and this joint has been closed on and off at periods of time for like fucking a year at a time, which is kind of cool because when it comes back, it really does breathe life and normally dominates because it's a sick venue, 1, and then 2, the new generation don't know what it is, so they kind of get a new experience. For whatever reason, when it opens nowadays, it sort of gets like 1-2 years, it dominates, and then it sort of falls over. I'm not sure why, but that's just the case. But Bubble was there for a very long time. So the 2 incidents that I was talking about was there was a Vietnamese lad who stabbed someone with a screwdriver. Sorry, mate. Yeah, why?
You're recording?
Yeah, I do like YouTube videos.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you security or something?
No. This is our shop.
Oh, no. I do like nightclub reviews, so I'm talking about that club there.
Okay.
Yeah. All good.
Please make sure it's good reviews. Huh?
Yeah, I
And
will.
Also tell them there's a bottle shop next door.
Okay, done. I'll do that for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Legend. So, guys, there's a bottle shop next door right there. So, anyway, this Vietnamese lad, they had a fight over a girl or something like that. I'm not totally sure of the story, but he left, got a screwdriver, and then stabbed the dude in the neck. That guy unfortunately passed away, and then the guy who did it ran away and never was caught. He actually bailed back to Vietnam, and that's the end of that story. The other one was a machete attack. So it was towards the end of Bubble, so it was predominantly just hardstyle heads, and apparently it was like a really safe and wicked club, but towards the end it got a bit choppy. A lot of Asians, Vietnamese especially, were sort of starting to come to the venue towards the end of its life, and just because in general they were got into hardstyle. They still are into hardstyle, they love it now, and they started to come down. But back in those days, in the sort of early 2000s to mid 2000s, it was a little bit different. There was a lot more sort of knife crime with the Asian community than there is definitely now. So anyway, something had happened. Apparently a guy dropped a knife. The bouncers had gone and confronted him. I'm not sure what happened there, but effectively a couple of guys with machetes chopped the bouncers. So the guy got away with it. He lived, but there was another incident Bubble that was relatively serious, and I think was towards the end of its tender, ended up ending its career, and with a bad stain on it, I guess, which kind of sucks because everyone that I know who went there talks so highly of it, but everyone remembers it because of those two incidents. And on that night was a 10-year anniversary, so they've been around for 10 years, which is in nightclub terms, that's fucking ridiculous. Like a nightclub lasts for over 6 years. It's an institution. A normal nightclub night span is about 2 years max. Anything above that is like very, very good. Currently now there's Reptile. My ex-business partner Kyle runs it, so it's called Reptile. It's back open again after probably about a year or year and a half being shut. Prior to that was a club called Treat, which was my competition when I was running Code, which is the last club that I ran when I was in Melbourne. And they sort of were dominating. They were hard competition, I'm not going to lie. They did really, really well. But what happened was one night something happened with security and they belted someone, pushed someone down the stairs, something like that. I don't fully remember. I remember, funnily enough, because I used to come sneak and check their line, so I would walk down from there and then come down and check their line. And some nights it would be wrapped around the corner and I'd be fucking like, ugh, because my line wasn't good. Other nights my line was massive and theirs wasn't, and I'd be like smiling to myself. So I would come down and do like a line check or a vibe check, and there was this dude who was getting pummeled just here on the corner. And it kind of came out, something happened, it was misjustice, whatever. And then normally when that sort of stuff happens, you sort of deal with it externally and you try to like ignore any backlash online. So there was a fair bit of backlash online, but for whatever reason, those guys decided to put out a comment about it, which sort of defended themselves and the venue, and it blew up fucking huge. People lost their minds that they were trying to defend themselves, and it went through this thing called Melbourne Gal Powers and a bunch of other stuff, and it got really, really out of control. And then it affected the night, and the night sort of slowly started to die off. But prior to that, it was doing like fucking 2,000 people. After that incident, and maybe a couple other little ones that probably were unavoidable, but maybe weren't handled the best, it slowly sort of started to have some issues. But those guys had a good tender. They ended up going to another venue. They did well. Good promoters, Alex Greco, Adam Jacklin was another one of them. They did a really good job. Over there was another club night. I don't remember what the name was. It was shut down after COVID. It was run by the Poison Apple lads. I don't think they even called the Poison Apple lads, but Dre and Ross Hawkins. They've done a bunch of stuff all over this part of King Street, so we'll go into it no doubt as we keep walking. I'm a star here, King's Gate. We used to be able to get a hotel here for about $150. So if I was having a late one and I wasn't going to drive, that's where I was staying, and it was fucking shit as. It was not a nice hotel, the funniest thing was, as I sit there, the club that I used to run around the corner, I could hear it just going boom, 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 boom. But I couldn't complain because if I did, I was ratting on my friends. King John Souvlaki bars. I've had more of them than I'd like to admit. Basically, last time I was there, I did this party in the penthouse for Adrian Battalion and Troy Candy. So I had run this event. It was a shitstorm. I took 48 hours to change it. I did it in a penthouse that I hired over there from like a real estate agent that had one that was not fitted out. And I ran it really, really quickly. It was good, it made the papers. Herald Sun said that the police came, which they did just to check in on it, but they made out like they came to close it down. It was some big deal or whatever, which is probably no surprise really, it's the fucking Herald Sun. But I ended up going there afterwards, like 11 a.m. and I was like, couldn't even put a sentence together in a souvlaki. But that wouldn't be the first, it won't be the last time I did that. This is La-di-da. My business partner owns this, Georgie. What have I got to say about La-di-da? What do I have to say, George? I was being a smartass when I talked about filming it, and I said that I was going to say not nice things, but that's not what I'm going to say. So George owns this with his family. His old man owned it, his uncle owned it, a guy called Barry, and a guy called Steve. Steve used to run famous events before my time, but like they're very, very well resonated from people, sunny side up. He's a fucking character, absolute legend. Steve Sunny, I used to call him, but I think his name's Steve Ficar. I'm probably saying it wrong because I don't know how to say it, but absolute character, absolute legend, absolute sound purist. Absolutely used to always talk about speakers and the sound and how good it was. He's just an old rave head, and we love him. There's not a whole heap of them around anymore like him, but great lad, and he now owns Northcote Theatre. So I walked out because the light was bad there, but I used to do a night here called Little Birdie. It didn't last for very long. I'll admit when I flopped something, but I killed it at the start. And at that time we were going to the juice epidemic, and the juice epidemic was fucked on King Street. I've talked about it multiple times. And basically there was this dance called the Juicy Wiggle, which I'm going to show you right now. So that dance there was created by people who were on juice, and people who were on juice would always be doing it, and it was sort of like I'm not going to say every time they did it they blew out, but it was like the people who were doing it, the kind of people that blew out. We come up with an idea to ban that dance. So it was a bit of a footloose moment, and now I look back at it, it's pretty outrageous, but we were like, we're going to fucking ban the dance. But at the time it was polarizing, so people who were doing the dance were really supportive of it, and people who weren't doing the dance fucking hated it. So it was this like love-hate relationship in Melbourne where the people, they were sort of like house heads versus like Melbourne sound heads at the time that hated one another, and we were doing a house night, so we're trying to ban that style of music because we weren't going to play it, and there was a whole bunch of backlash on it. People cracked the shit, and it kind of created a lot of attention, which at the start really helped us. We got a big crowd and amount of people come through probably because of that attention, and then over time I think it's slowly died down because that kind of other clubs at the time, and we didn't give it as much attention as it needed, and we sort of started to go back on what we had said. It was only going to be a house night, and then we started doing other kind of genres, and it fell over, but it is what it is. That's the only night I ever ran there. Other than that, I used to do heaps of parties out here, so we're going to go through the back here. But basically there's a laneway out here, and we used to do these laneway parties. So now, if I find some footage, I'm going to show you the laneway parties right here. So they were called Debbie Does Laneway parties, and we'd literally shut down these laneways, and we'd use like a scissor lift to put the DJ on, and they would just go up in the air. We do like 1,000 people through the back area, and I'm going to walk you through it now, and then I'll tell you another story on the back side of this area. So down here was the back area. So here, there were people here, so I'm going to walk around and try not to make too much noise. But back then, this glass area wasn't here. All this was still here, so it was like, at that time it was like lanterns. So we'd use this whole space here, and just on the wall there, we'd have like a scissor lift, and the scissor lift would go up in the air, so the DJ would get on it, and they'd go up high, and then they would DJ down to this whole area here. And the bar would be open, you can get drinks and you can walk around. And then this was all gated off. But as I said, there'd be 800 to 1,000 people dancing in this fucking alleyway, and that was the view. It was pretty fucking sick, I'm not gonna lie. So that was Debbie Does Laneway, and we did like 3 of them. The story that I was gonna tell, which is kind of sad, is on my last one that I did here, was when I found out my mum passed away. So when I was growing up, my mum had on and off drug problems, and it was something that she ever kicked, and she was always sort of in and out of hospital, and she had, drug-related issues, psychosis and different bits and pieces. And I was here the day that I was literally downstairs with the owners and the promoters, basically about to have a couple of drinks. And then I got a phone call 3 times, and I eventually answered, and they told me my mum had passed away. So I had to leave, go see her, and deal with that, and it was pretty fucked, but it's a memory I've got, and as I said, I try to be honest in this channel, so I'm not going to sugarcoat shit. She passed away from drug-related issues, and it was what motivated me to completely stop doing drugs. So now I don't do any anymore, but that was basically it. So prior to that I did, probably from trauma and PTSD from growing up around it. But after that, I have completely stopped and I don't touch any of that shit because I saw what it did to my family. Anyway, fucking very deep rant. Sorry to take you down that rabbit hole, guys. But these parties were sick. Other than that, La-di-da used to get run by a group called Poison Apple. They did also Pony. They did a bunch of other shit. And they did really fucking well. So they were the only people in this venue that really fucking killed it for a very, very long time. They used to have Mr. Chang's in this room, and he used to do hip hop. And that was like a room that was, especially in the west side and the north side of Melbourne, people loved. They loved it a lot. I, again, didn't come here because I wasn't from the west side. Dre and Ross Hawkins, funnily enough, I've never met either of them, even though I ran the opposing night at Crova from them, and I took this over from them. I've actually never met either of them, but I know who they are because I was my competitors on and off. They did a really, really good job, and they've had a great tender as promoters, and they're probably some of the best in Melbourne. But they definitely used to own the west side and the north side, whereas we were like southeast and east side. So even though we had competitive nights and we would borrow DJs and bits and pieces like that, we actually weren't really competition because they had their own crowd, we had our own crowd, and we were sort of doing similar stuff, but our crowds didn't cross, and neither did we. We didn't really cross paths either. Other than that, Borscht and Boris run it now, called Mango Fridays. Prior to that, they ran Fashion Fridays. And I think that they won't be pissed off for me to say that it was the home of heavies for a long time. So with that came dramas, but I'm not going to go into it because it's a touchy subject. Across the road, Showgirls. There's a story that I tell about Showgirls. Showgirls, there used to be a club next door to it. You can't even see it anymore. I don't even know if it's still there. But basically, they used to have like Samoan nights there and different international nights and whatever. And I almost ran it. You can go find that story on my TikTok. I'm not going to tell here because someone, I think, got a little bit upset about it. So I'm not going to incriminate myself any further on that story. So here we have another venue that has been around for fucking longer than I've been alive. So this is now Holy Moly. Prior to being Holy Moly, it was Sorry Grandma. Prior to being Sorry Grandma, it was Tunnel. So Tunnel is a club that was around for a long, long, long time. And a lot of people in Melbourne talk about it very fondly because it was an institution. Sorry Grandma, again, was designed by Michael Delaney, the guy that I talked about before, who did Honky Tonks, Spider-Man, La-di-da, and more. And Michael did that space, and then Dave Cush was probably the most successful in it. He ran a night called Infectious. Was it called Infectious? I think it was called Infectious. But he ran that night, he did really, really well. He's doing thousands and thousands there. I don't know much about Tunnel, so I can't really comment on it. I know that Lawyer X from the Underbelly show was in a car crash after it, but that's probably it. I'm sure people are going to comment. You should comment below if you've got mad stories of Tunnel, but it was before my time. It was shut for like 10 years before it turned to Sorry Grandma, so I didn't even know there was a fucking nightclub there for a very, very long time. And then when it reopened, I was like, what the fuck? And then I found out the history, but it was on and off there for ages. It had different promoters running through it and whatnot, some successful, some not, and then eventually they just turned into Holy Moly, and since then it's been Holy Moly. Other than that, there was a viral video of just here, which you could probably find if you Googled it. With lads from the southeast, a bunch of Samoans, that punched on you, and the fight went for fucking ages, and the cops had to break it out, but it was like a full-on like UFC style fight that just went on this part of the street for ages. So you can check it out, but that's probably the only notable things I can think of in this space or area, because I miss Tunnel, and I know there was going to be millions of stories about Tunnel, but I don't know them, so I'll leave it for someone else to tell. So at one point, the Grollos who own the Rialto started buying up all the nightclub space and venues in this area. They had plans to turn it into like a fancy street. The shopping when the aquarium was sort of built all around or after that time. So it was going to become like a hotel district with nice restaurants and nice places to shop. It didn't happen because a lot of the nightclub owners, especially Martha, the queen of clubs, I've spoken about her a couple of times, she sort of put her foot down and didn't allow that to happen. So again, like a heap of times, and we're going to talk to Martha soon in one of my podcasts, she sort of saved King Street. Saved King Street, maybe some people out there would say fucking leaving that joint the way it is not saving it, but she was the one that sort of stopped the development, like what we've seen on Chapel Street happening on King Street. So this is Men's Gallery. It's a gallery for men, and their art pieces are ladies. I have only been there once, and it was when I was 17. My uncle took me there. We dropped my auntie off at the airport, and I used a fake ID to get in there. And it was one of the best nights of my teenage life, as you can imagine. I had beers, and I saw full-grown women in not much at all. Other than that, across the road was Goldfingers, which was another really synonymous clubs. If you Google either of these venues and you write incident or stabbing or shooting or fight, it's going to come up with a massive list of them, so I'm not going to go into them. But of all the places in this street, I would say that these two, when they were open, men's still, I guess, just because of the nature of it, have seemed to have the most amount of trouble. But I don't know what happened to Goldfingers. To be honest, up until I just looked at it then, I didn't even know that it shut down. So shows how often I attend strip clubs. So my missus is asking. Nah, I don't attend them. This over here is Colonial Hotel. A nickname for it is Brown Alley, is what I call it. Brown Alley is owned by my business partner George's uncle, Tolly. Tolly recently passed away, and it was very sad for our industry because Tolly was one of the biggest legends. So many different people from the guys that he owned Let Them Eat Cake, parts of Pitch, obviously owned Colonial, owned La Di Da, owned RMH, and without Tolly, a lot of actual careers, not mine but my business partners and heaps of other techno promoters and other people that have had ups and downs, because you do as a promoter, wouldn't have existed. So he would get people during those hard times and he would give them jobs so they could get through, and he would give them opportunity to be able to run events here. And this venue was famous for walk-ups. So walk-ups is a term when people just walk through and they come in. So you could do an event here and sell 200 tickets and do 500 people because it had such a good amount of walk-ups. It was probably the best in Melbourne, I reckon. Like, it was fucking ridiculous. So because of that, Tolly was able to give people opportunity to sort of get their roots back and do what they love and then get back on their feet and dominate. And some of those guys, some of the biggest promoters ever that came were born from here, and without Tolly, they never would have had that opportunity. So, rest in peace, Tolly. He's one of the forefathers of our industry, and without him, there would be so many people whose careers never begin and there's no story to start to even tell. So all we can say is thank you. So I'm trying to cross the road. I don't know how long it's going to take. But over here, I'm going to go over to the traffic lights because it's starting to rain. But Colonial Hotel, what have I done at Colonial Hotel? Or Brown Alley. So I never call Colonial Hotel. Even when people say that, it seems weird to me. But basically, I've got heaps of yarns because this joint has been around for so long. So I've done so much stuff. I've done all venue. One of my biggest ever events was a 1,600 person event. And that was here at Brown Alley. Oh, fuck, car. That was here. We did a Debbie Does XL. And I made a good amount of cash. I also did Angie Call here. I did Him and Him here. I did a whole bunch of stuff. I had a brand called TNC. And we did it with a guy called Mike Toner and My Boys Loud, so Andreas and Kyle. And we used to do really well with it. One story I've got, I remember I was sober that night and I came, and this is like Tech House when it first started blowing up. And I remember I was out having a smoke and I came back in, the light came on, it sort of beamed over the crowd, and every single person was like, and I was like, what the fuck? Did someone spray MDMA with a super soaker into the crowd? But that was Tech House at the beginning. Good pingers, good music, and slow BPMs. Things have changed now, BPMs have gone up by 25%. What else did I do here? Another yarn I've got is they do an event here called Schnitz and Tits. They probably still do it, I'd say. And basically what it is that you come down and you eat schnitzels and you look at tits, believe it or not. It is what it is. It literally spells it out in the name. So I was down here for busting someone's birthday or something like that, and I had my first amateur boxing fight. And basically I wasn't drinking, so I was driving. So I drove up and I was with my mates and I was like, I'll have one beer, like, you know, I can't be too strict. And I had a fight in literally 10 days. And I didn't have one beer, I had 100 beers, because they kept putting down the jugs and they were saying, you don't have to drink them, if they're there at the end of the night, we'll just take them back and won't charge you. And that is an impossible feat for most men, especially when you catch them with your mates. So I didn't do that. We drank fuckloads of them, and I ended up getting home like 9 o'clock in the morning or something stupid after tramp. And I was wigging the fuck out. I lost the tickets for the boxing match, and I had the worst anxiety because I had to go through one of the most stressful things in my life. It was my first amateur fight. And I had this fucking massive hangover, and I'd lost tickets and I was losing my shit. But I lived, I had that fight, and it was great. It was one of the best things I ever did in my life. And I don't regret that night because it's a funny fucking yarn. Other notable promoters that have worked in here, he's got Novel, they've worked in here, still do a lot of work. There's one called Likes of You, which is huge. They were like, when I was coming up, they were like the chin strokers. The chin stroker means like really kind of prestigious techno or very serious for music. They were kind of like the leaders, and those guys kind of cut their teeth here. We also had Darkbeat, Muscar's another guy that worked here. There was Hugh Waters who ran Rats. Funnily enough, I looked at an inbox years and years after it was dominating. So they used to do 2,000-3,000 people here, and I looked at an inbox to ask him a question, and I saw that he actually asked me to be involved in it. And I just didn't see it. I never applied, so I never got the opportunity to. So I literally fucking missed the inbox. I probably missed out on hundreds of thousands of dollars, but is what it is. Oh, there was also Click Click, which he also ran. That was a really big indie night. It was sort of like the home of indie back in the day, and this was sort of 2005, and that's like the Ajax, Bang Gang, Block Party, fucking that really, really indie scene, you know, tight jeans with fringes over, not emo, but indie. It was a thing, and this was sort of like where they would all come on a Saturday. And then on Thursdays they had Next, so I used to come here a little bit with my cousin because he was an emo, scary looking emo, covered in tats all over his body and a big fringe, and he was a drummer, and I'd come here sometimes and get fucked up with him on the Jaeger bombs on Thursday nights, and they would just play like old school punk shit and emo shit, and they had bands beforehand. So Next was around for a very fucking long time, and Second to Bang was probably the biggest night there was. I think they had Plastic here too, I could be wrong, but I think Plastic, which was another iconic sort of heavy metal slash pop punk emo night, was here. Dirty Days, which was the TFU famous party that I've talked about in other videos, they sort of finished up their career here. Jason Colbeck and the team. I think they're starting to do reunions now, but this was towards the end. They also did Sunday Fun Day here, and then at the moment currently it's Levels. So Levels, when I was at Code, they finished at Platform 1, which I'm going to go down to later, and then they came here and they dominated. They were doing fucking 3,000 people. Not sure the state of it now. No doubt it's busy because those guys are gun promoters. So Levels have been around for 10 years. It's one of the biggest and longest running club nights in Melbourne. But yeah, the venue's a fucking rabbit warren. So if you're there and you've been there before, you can see all these windows and shit. And this whole venue, like, it's not all venue. There's like little doors and trap doors and fucking staircases. It's very easy to get lost, but I guess that's the allure to it. It's very old fashioned. Hasn't been touched, I don't reckon, since Tolly bought it. There's a fuckload of stuff I just went through, and there's probably a bunch of shit that I've missed too. That Stum guy that's huge at the moment, he started here just after COVID, working with Monty McGowan and Kyle, probably worth noting. And then other than that, this is a story from beforehand. So before it was Brown Alley, it was called Lazar or Lasers or Lazar, I don't know how to explain it. It's like Lazar. And that's another one. When people talk about Tunnel, they talk about Dome, they talk about Metro, they talk about that joint, Lazar. And the story that I know about it, the only story I know was Alphonse Gangitano, the Black Prince of Carlton. He bashed almost to death a famous boxer called Barry Michael, and it's sort of a famous story. Again, you can Google it. But him and his friends bashed them over a fight or not being a part of a fight. I don't know the full story, but so that's the only real story I know from those days. Again, if you know some stories, tell me. I'm going to find someone who can tell me those old stories because I want to hear them too. But I don't know, so I can't tell. It's not my place to talk about it. All right, we're going to walk over to Queen Street now. So as we're walking back to our car, there's two stories I forgot. So one is that Martha from police harassment and defamation, because they said all this stuff about her, she got $90,000 from the Vic poll. That was one of the times that she won against them. And she's the owner of Inflation. And the other story was about Tunnel, so I forgot about this one. Dan Andrews used to sell hot dogs at Tunnel. So Tunnel Nightclub, he used to be out the front fucking selling hot dogs. And I think a lot of people wish that he stayed there selling hot dogs because he decimated our industry in 2000 and 2020. As you know, we all had to shut down and we all had to go do different things. I started an alcohol company. Martha started selling dildos. Some people just took 2 years off. Others pivoted, and we lost a lot of good men and women in the hospital industry due to that. What I would say, even though I wasn't anti-COVID at the time or lockdowns, I would say probably the world's biggest overaction. But it fucked our industry. They're actually knocking back someone as we talk. Must be too pissed. Intox. There's a venue that I don't want to mention, but it's on the street, and I'll tell you yarn, so there's no connection to it. But back again, when the juice epidemic was on, it was bad, and there was obviously pressure from the police, and there was nothing we could do. And we started to see it as desensitized, so you can't tell which ones are bad and serious and needed a lot of attention, and which ones would probably just blow over, like literally blow out, blow over, whatever. And basically, one of the venues on the street, what they would do, they didn't think they were that serious, and they didn't want to call the ambulance because they basically had too many of them at different points throughout the last fucking 5-6 months that have been going on. They would just pull them into the cool room and let them cool down for a bit and have a security guard watching them. And I remember one time walking in there and there was like 3 of them. The security guards just watching these dudes, checking their pulses to make sure nothing wrong was happening. Basically first aid, I guess, and monitoring them because they didn't want to call the ambulance unless they got bad enough to consider doing it, because the attention it was bringing was getting to a point that it was going to close us down and we were going to lose all our livelihood. So to take other, I guess, precautions in a sense, or other methods of dealing with it, because calling the police and calling the ambulance wasn't doing us any fucking favors. So not something that I think anybody is proud of or even would admit, but at the same time, and that's why I don't want to finger out the venue, but basically it was something that we had to do, because if we had called up every single one and called the police legitimately, they would have shut down all these fucking joints. Another one was obviously talked about it earlier, but it's still, I'm looking at it as I'm walking across, but it was Tramp. So Tramp, at its peak, man, that place was fucking the 161 of Melbourne. And basically, you know, to get into that joint, it was honestly tighter than a nun's nasty. So we would stand there on that door, and people just standing there helping people to come out was our job. Like, I legitimately wouldn't go in for hours. I just stand there going, yep, them, because the lines would be so big. But those guys, Matty Giles and Steve Petheridge, they were very, very, very good at hospitality. So when you go down there, say I went down there on a Saturday night, legitimately, those boys would give me 30 drink cards, a booth, fucking jugs of alcohol, and it didn't matter if I had my 50-year-old uncle with me or my 18-year-old brother, they would let us all come through. So they were so good to promoters, so good to hospos, so good to anybody, and it was exclusive spot, and they really took care of us vampires, us non-day walkers. And because of that, it had a very long tenure. It was like 13 years. It's only recently just shut. And I think it was because it took care of the people that basically make this city buzz. The only other one with King Street is like, I haven't gone through like on other streets and other clubs and stuff. I've been really like, oh, you know, this happened. So much shit happens on King Street that if I did that, you'd be watching this for 17 hours. Like even recently there was a guy who ran around stabbing 4 people. Not long ago there was scenes of like, there was an African gang that were attacking each other over in the corner over there. It happens all the time. It happens honestly every couple of weeks. So if I was to do it, we'd have to sit here. You guys would fucking unsubscribe to my channel and jump on another one because it would be called the Trauma Channel, and it'd be you just watching me talk about fucking incidents over the last 30 years that happened at King Street. I don't reckon there's a street in Melbourne that's had more crime or problems than this street. It's our King's Cross. Like, it is what it is. I've seen worse incidents of other places, way worse incidents, but at the same time, this definitely has the most consistent amount of incidents. Honestly, sometimes when I'm doing this, I feel like I'm talking to myself. Because I am fucking talking to myself, and it's weird as, but anyway, thank God I know people are going to watch it and talk about it because it makes me feel less weird about fucking talking to myself on the street. If I didn't have a camera in my hand, I probably could get committed. How sick is that building? So I just did a hook turn to get onto Queen Street, so we're now on Queen Street, and it triggered a memory of mine. So on this exact street, Queen Street, I was dropping the Peking Duck boys off, and this is when their first time in Melbourne. I was dropping them off somewhere on Queen Street, I'm not exactly sure why, but I did a hook turn. And for those that don't know what a hook turn is, in Melbourne, you basically park in front of the oncoming traffic that way as the traffic's coming this way, and then when the light goes green, you go first. It's a uniquely Melbourne thing, so I'm told, but I remember when I did it, those boys were wigging the fuck out, like, what are you doing, man? And I'm like, a hook turn, don't you do these in other cities? So I think it's a Melbourne thing. If I'm wrong, let me know. But those guys, it was a bit of a funny yarn that just triggered it because it was on this street that I was doing that. I'm walking up to CQ now, a famous Melbourne club that's been around for a very, very long time. It's massive, it's a huge club. It can hold up to 3,000 people. It's owned by a multi-millionaire. I can't remember his name. There's another club up further called Red Pocket. I don't know exactly what it is, so I'm not going to cover it. I remember when I first started doing club stuff, I used to be a driver, so I used to pick up a lot of artists because I used to run a club called Orange Whip, and I used to pick up a lot of artists, and they would come play for us, and then I have to drop them back in the city. So artists, again, like Peking Duck, I use as an example, Timmy Trumpet, heaps of dudes from interstate, I would have to drive them to the city. Don't know why that just triggered my memory a bit. I remember dropping or picking up Timmy Trumpet from Queen Street, so he must have been playing at CQ that night. You can see how massive it is. At its peak, there's just people everywhere spilt through. So CQ, there was 2 sort of periods of it. The first one was around my time. It was basically a club at the time that was full of jocks on Saturdays and chocks on Fridays. So it was a European night on Fridays, run by Infectious, which was Dave Cush, and another guy called Melbourne George. Travis Gresham, I know, worked there too at some point. I'm not sure if he ran that night or it was another one. On the Saturdays, it was run by 2 ex-cops, or so I've been told, guys called Dale and Danny, and sometimes people mistake me for Danny, so when they know I'm a promoter, they're like, oh, you Danny from CQ. I'm not Danny from CQ. I never met the guy, I never met Dale either, but those guys, I dare say there'll be heaps of people that remember them that are watching this video, and this joint was a mecca for footy players, out of suburban or country guys who played football, and chicks that were coming to try and marry football players. They used to have a lot of fights, obviously, but at the same time, from what I was told, it was an awesome club. Everybody has super fond memories of it. I have never, ever partied here. And I think it was just because the way I sort of come up, I was more of a music guy, and I was into the underground stuff and certain genres, whereas here was just like a place to pick up birds and hang around and get on the piss. So it wasn't my scene. Afterwards, it They kind of reno, they have them heaps of times. There was a club here called Flamingo, which was humongous. It was fucking the biggest Friday probably ever that I ever saw. It was run by my ex-business partners at Code, Nick and Luke, and a bunch of other guys. It was run by the Graz brothers on Saturdays at one point. There was a whole bunch of other stuff, but there was one point where this joint was turning over 6,000 people a weekend. Only recently, not even that long ago. But basically, now there is neither a Friday or a Saturday here that I know of. Maybe there is, but not that I know of. But both those places have left and moved on. I think the venue was just way too big for the current climate in Melbourne. Basically, there's not enough people to go out. So to fill this joint, you need stupid amounts of people, and there isn't stupid amounts of people going out anymore. During those COVID pops where everything went nuts, this joint was pumping, and prior, it was fucking going off its head. And they shut down for a long time, probably like 2 years or 3 years during COVID, and put millions through this joint. So the joint is absolutely elite. It's sparkling clean. It's fucking amazing. They still do long weekends events. One of the biggest Serbian nights called Moda, run by Boris Radman, who I interviewed on my podcast. They still do events here, and they have done events here, and they've done thousands. So it's probably fucking broken some of the bar records in Melbourne, I would say. Some of the bars I know here are 200 plus they've done on certain nights, especially Moda being one of those nights that owns that record. There's a story years and years and years ago, but a guy presented to the guards with a knife, and not sure exactly what happened, but one of the guards ended up stabbing the guy, and he lost his job. I think he went to jail for a bit. Other than that, that's really the only notable story I've got, other than the nights and shit that were in here. They were massive. But a lot of promoters doing the old bar door deal made a lot of fucking money, because you can imagine $20 times 2,500 people, that's a lot of coin. I'm sure Dale and Danny now live in the Bahamas in a fucking mansion and a giant yacht. They had a long tender here. They were here for a long, long time doing those sort of numbers very, very successfully. So hats off to those boys. One night here once, there was called Peaches and Cream. I can't remember the promoters that ran it, but I think that was the quietest night they ever had. I think they did like 7 people or something like that. I'm not sure. If anyone can remember those promoters, let me know, because I don't remember what their names are. The weather is Melbourning. It's fucking pissing down, but we're going to soldier through. Up here, we got Miss Collins. Miss Collins is owned by a collective of guys. Bobby Love, Nick Bass, there's a whole bunch of other dudes I'm not mentioning. So a lot of guys that own Alhambra had a lot to do with it. Miss Collins has been sort of the fanciest club in Melbourne for a very long time. They've had a super successful Asian night. I think it's on Saturday now, but at one point it was Fridays, I'm pretty sure. And it dominates still. The Fridays are iconic because they're an R&B Friday, but they've had some of the biggest talent in Australia. They've had like Little Pump, Little Uzi Vert, that's recently. They've had Sean Paul, they've had Tiger, they've had Juice WRLD, they've had fucking Jack Harlow, they've had, you name it. They had Kid Laroi, but Kid Laroi didn't make it because obviously he got sick that night at Billboards, which I was actually there that night, and then didn't do that Rod Laver show, but he was supposed to play here. The reason why they're able to do that is because, that's over there, there's people in it right now. The reason why they're able to do that is that one of the biggest hip-hop bookers, a guy called Alex McDonald, is involved in the night, and he's got a cool story that I'm going to tell in a second as I walk away from this joint. But that's Miss Collins there. It's glitzy, it's glamoury, it's super, super nice. It's very, very busy. They had a Latin night on Thursdays for a long time, which is probably what it's on right now, I'd say. Guys that own it have done a wicked job. It's been open for like 10 plus years, and they've had some of the biggest artists in the world there. That's probably all I've got to say about the joint, really. I myself have also not really partied there. It's not really my scene. I'm not a suit wearing guy. But the guys who run it are fucking legends. They do all the big event plays like Australian Open, F1, all those sort of like big events. They're always, the art players are always in Miss Collins. It's the sort of place that if you want to spend $20,000, $30,000, you can pretty easily. Currently, I'm wetter than an otter's pocket. It is fucking pouring down. I'm gonna do one more club, which is QBH, which is not on King Street or Queen Street, but it's sort of on the way home for me. There's a whole bunch of clubs I've missed out on, so I'm going to come back and do a CBD edition. I'm going to roll off some club names, but if you think of any other ones, message me, because when I come back in the next 3 or 4 weeks, I want to visit them all. But here's some that I want to cover, but it's Bond, Alhambra, Next Blue, there's Heat, Honky Tonks, where Hidden Forest was, there's Lounge Bar, Neverland, GPO, New Guernica, F4, Marrakesh, there's one behind Crown, I can't remember the name of it, 7, Motel, Albion. Fuck, I'm sure there's heaps more that I've forgotten, guys. If you do know any, let me know so I can do them all. But I'm going to do a CBD edition where I basically just go all the clubs that aren't on King Street and Queen Street. As I was driving to QBH, I saw Platform 1. So I can't not do it because then I'm going to come back and do it, and it's an awkward place to fucking park. So Platform 1 has been around for fucking ages. It's one of the most unique clubs I reckon in Melbourne. I've done only a couple of events here. The first one I ever did was an event called Ground Zero on Anzac Day. For those that don't know, Anzac Day you have to be closed by 3 a.m. so the people from the dawn service aren't watching messy pieces of shit like me wander around the city. But basically, I did the event here and we sold it out. But we did like 800, 900. But this joint is so fucking hard to fill because it's so big. The idea of it is so awesome. Exactly how you'd imagine a fucking techno venue in Berlin or some shit. But it's pokey, it's different, it's unique, it's an awesome venue, but it is challenging at times to fill. So because it's so long. So if you do 800 people, you couldn't do 1,200, 1,300 people, but because it's kind of like long and narrow, these sort of two tunnels. But at the same time, if you could do that, it would be fucking mad. But obviously we have liquor licensing rules, so we're not allowed to do that. A guy called Chris owns it. He was the one that established it. He still is the owner of it. And basically it is this. So these were, back in the day, old train carriages. So this is where the trains used to be inside. So all these places here, and it's probably like, I reckon legit 100 meters it goes in long. So he owns 2 of these tunnels and he turned them into nightclubs. Obviously there's no sound issues here because there's nothing around, and these things are solid fucking cement. I wish I could go in there. I will go in there eventually because that's my next part after I do these outdoor walking series. I'm going to start going through clubs. They're these giant tunnels that run all the way to the Yarra, and there's 2 of them here and here. It's fucking awesome. It looks sick in videos. I saw Flume here for the first time and there was 400 people here. He was doing Can't Say with a guy called Daniel Pecci, and he just sort of blown up on SoundCloud, and I got to come down because I used to speak to him online, and I walked up from Tramp and watched him, and it was unbelievable. Other than that, Chris is one of those legends in our industry where he's been around forever. He's always good for a chat, great hospo, great publican. Even though he's a nightclub, he's like a publican. He can talk the legs off a table, and he's got fucking plenty of good yarns. But back in the day when I was younger, it was sort of like a Euro night, and like a real dominating one. One of my mates ran an event here called Derailed. It was like a sort of tech housey, fucking fidgety thing at the time, and that was sort of short-lived. And then over time, it was probably, in my generation, was famous for Levels. So Levels was here for a long time and they dominated. They eventually shut down after I started up Code. I'm not going to say I closed them, but I was definitely the last nail in the coffin. And then they went over to Colonial, and they had a major impact on me because they went from doing fucking 400 people to 2,500 people. I maybe should have sent some people over here to keep them open so it didn't affect me so much, but that is what it is. I've got a story that I tell on the Boris Radman podcast where I talk to about a guy called Borsch, and I actually loved it. So in our industry, it's very dog eat dog. We're always fighting and arguing, but kind of it's also fun banter at the same time. And I remember when this closed, Borsch had messaged me, their promoter of Levels, and he runs fucking so much stuff in Melbourne. He actually owns this now. Anyway, he messaged me saying, get you next time. And he got me. He did get me. But it's all love and war. End of the day, we're all going to be the same people probably in the next 10 years, and it was the same people for 2 decades. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So he wasn't a sort of loser, he was a good one. Them two, that group, are probably some of the best promoters to ever live in my generation. The platform one is now being done up. So now it's all shiny inside, it's got heaps of neons, heaps of lights and rah-rah. It looks fucking elite. They spent a lot of money on it, millions of dollars on it. On the Sunday, they've got a night called Caramel. The boys from Rhythm and a bunch of other guys, Zeus and guys, they run it. And Rhythm started with me. They're African promoters, Mauritian boys, all different types of African. And they actually started with me. So when they first started, I was sort of the first person to give them a chance. And I kind of continued to give them a go. They weren't doing anything wrong, that's how I looked at it, but occasionally there was trouble that came with the group at the time that were coming through. And some of those issues were serious, they actually were serious issues. And I continued to give them a go time after time, even though others probably didn't want to or weren't willing to because they were worried about the risk. And those guys have prospered into some of the best urban promoters in Melbourne. They absolutely fucking kill it. Caramel pumps. It's been killing on Sundays for a long time now. And it's like a culture epicenter for urban music. So there's Crown, guys. I'm not going to cover that tonight. I'm going to go to QH, which is up here. Crown, there's a whole bunch of clubs there. These days, people from Melbourne don't really go there. It's mostly people from overseas and interstate that go there. But back in the day, when I first turned 18 and beyond, before that, sorry, I shouldn't say beyond, it was packed. It was very, very big. There was like Heat there, Next Blue, Mothership. There was a whole bunch of shit there, and it was some of Melbourne's busiest nightclubs. With that, there was a whole lot of dramas that came with it. And it's a story for another day. I think I'm going to do it when I do my CBD one. But there was a lot of the underbelly shit that was famous in Melbourne was tangled into a lot of those nightclubs in the early days. And a lot of stories that come from that story that were involved with the clubs that were involved with that. But in my time, there was a joint called QBH. So this is QBH right here. It is what I call a ghost club. So one of my concepts that I want to do, let me wash this. So one of the concepts I want to do is called Ghost Club. So there's heaps of clubs in Melbourne like this one that are still inside, completely empty, and they're fucking they're as they were. There's like probably 7 or 8 that I know of on the top of my head. Last year there was probably more than that, and I'm gonna get into them, and I'm gonna do like a banded club tours. So that's another video series that I'm gonna get to once I get through Melbourne and I start doing some interstate stuff, which is gonna be sick. So this is one of those venues that I aim to get into. If anyone knows any that I don't know of and I can get into, please let me know, because it's gonna go fucking off, I reckon. Anyway, QBH. Basically, this joint here used to hold 3,000. It was the last real super club. There was another super club called Neverland that didn't really work, but this was the last real super club that fucking killed it. So prior to this, there was Metro, there was Evo, there was all these joints that could do 2,000-3,000. Now there's CQ, but even that, it's like a bar kind of restaurant, hybrid nightclub. This was a full-blown proper nightclub. 3,000 people with just one stage. So it was like a mini festival every single week. QBH, when I was 20 probably, was Future took it on. So Future was the biggest music festival group in Melbourne at the time, or probably Australia, and they ran Future Music, and they also ran Summer Days. So they took it on, and they ran it super successfully. They closed down Metro, which I was fucking pissed about because that was my favourite venue, but I ended up coming across here and doing a bit of work. I was making money, I was a host, I had a list, and it was easy coin because everyone was coming here. The whole fucking of Melbourne was coming here. Basically, they had massive internationals all the time, and like Fuzzy Hair. I think they had fucking Axwell from Swedish House Mafia here. The list is actually massive on how many people they had here at different times. Obviously, they were touring them a lot for the future, and it started to get more and more trouble. So when there's a lot of people, there's obviously a lot of issues. And basically what happened was there was 2 incidents, and it sort of sparked the 2 a.m. lockout stuff that I've talked about in the Burke Street one, where we did the protest. Basically, it was sparked not predominantly from this, but it was like these 2 issues were sort of the catalyst of why the Herald Sun started to attack nightclubs and saying there was war on the street and rah rah. I've gone into it before. I think it was an over-exaggeration. I was working on the streets and I didn't see any more violence then than I did prior to that. And I see probably less now. There's not much violence at all in the city. It's very fucking rare to see these days. But anyway, what happened was a guy died from getting king hit, and about 15 minutes later, someone else died from getting king hit. So they got a lot of pressure from the government and whatnot, and it closed. It closed famous. So that was the end. QBH never opened again, and that was probably like 15 years ago. And it was the death of the super clubs in Melbourne, and we've never really seen them return since. We've seen venues do 3,000, but not in one spot with one stage. So it's sad to see. Another story I have, which is actually kind of wild, I just remembered it then, but the owner of Earthcore, a guy called Spiro Birusine, arguably the most controversial promoter that ever lived in Australia. There's many, many yarns about him. One of the wildest humans I've ever met in my life. But he told me one story that basically when he was running Earthcore, he was making millions and millions and millions of dollars. He was a millionaire and broke 5 or 6 times during his journey, and he ran Earthcore for 25 years. But one of the stories he told me was he had Aphex Twin, which are a massive sort of trance fucking techno artist. They're still massive. No doubt some people don't know them. No doubt people are going to be like, fuck yeah, for Aphex Twin. But he hired this venue out, and he built a cage that was hanging from the roof. So you can imagine 3,000 people underneath. And Aphex Twin played to everybody under there. And he paid for the whole thing, and it was completely free. So he just literally had a party and invited 3,000 people for his own event. And then he told me that afterwards, Aphex Twin, they went to him, Aphex Twin, and his girlfriend at the time, they went and decided to do acid in the desert in a camper van. And they were out there partying for 7 days. And then he fell asleep at some point, and when he woke up, there was a letter from Aphex Twin, his girlfriend, saying that she was leaving him for Aphex Twin, and they went to Adelaide and flew back to London. If that story's true, I don't know. That's a story that he told me, and it's a fucking wild yarn. And that is the end of my King Street and Queen Street vlogs. If you guys like it, please like, comment, subscribe. It means heaps, and it helps the algorithm, and it helps me continue to keep doing this for you guys. Again, if there's stuff that you want me to talk about, there's venues that I've missed out on, there's stuff in the CBD, or even just clubs in other areas that you want me to talk about, comment below, let me know what they are so I can do them. Anyway guys, you keep raving, I'll keep ranting.